Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast, the number one source for news, analysis, and discussion on the Detroit Red Wings, the NHL, and all things hockey. Here are your hosts, Ryan Hanna, Brad Crisco, and Evan Lopsinger.
Boys, we're approaching a huge, important milestone here. Do you know what it is?
I am unfortunately aware.
Go ahead.
I too am also unfortunately aware.
What is it, Evan?
All 10-year anniversary.
No. Oh, okay. No,
Wait. What were you getting at?
No, that actually is a milestone coming up. But the milestone I'm talking about is the month was February. The year is 2024. Patrick Kane had just scored a filthy winner on the road. The Red Wings were in a playoff spot, trending well, and Brad and I had the most poorly aged episode of the Winged Wheel podcast in the last 4 or 5 years, not counting the Seider draft live stream. And we sat here and we said, and thank goodness, Brad, you were the one to get clipped for this by the Red Wings. You said, I think the Red Wings are making the playoffs. And I'm just saying, currently it is February. Patrick Kane just scored a filthy shootout goal on the road to win a game, and the Red Wings are in a playoff spot. You guys want to run it back? Evan's here this time.
I'm not saying
Second time's the charm. Let's do it. Come on.
Ryan, I was having a bad day. I didn't think you could make it worse, yet here we are.
You mean that I actually made your day worse?
I mean, you usually do.
That makes Ryan's day better.
That means that means a lot to me, pal. I appreciate that.
Anything I can do for you. Normally the bar is a little higher than it is today, though.
We are approaching our 10-year anniversary, and I like that it brings all three of us an immediate, visible amount of pain on our faces. That's just A, the passage of time is horrifying, and B, oh my God, outside of our wives, we have not seen any other people on the planet more than the people in this room. But to celebrate, we are actually making a call out for your favorite moments of the Winged Wheel podcast over the last 10 years. We're going to put a link in the description. You can describe it, cite the actual episode, whatever it is. We want to hear about your favorite moments, whether it's hockey related, something funny. Someone already dropped the spider reaction video, which...
a classic.
I saw a spider. I saw pineapple. I saw sitting or standing. I saw Trebucket. I saw Evan reading
Terry.
Yeah.
But Terry probably voted for Terry, so does that count?
Check out the link in the description. We're going to be doing some 10-year anniversary celebration stuff soon. All right, folks, a 7-game heater. Again, talk about running it back. Here to talk to you about all things Detroit Red Wings hockey, the world of the NHL, and lots more. I'm one of your hosts of the Winged Wheel podcast, Ryan Hanna.
I'm Brad Crisco.
And I'm Evan.
On this episode of the Winged Wheel podcast, we're going to be talking to you about Detroit's 2 wins since the last time we spoke. We recorded last episode before the Vancouver game because we were like, well, they won 5 and we're not sacrificing a win streak episode. They won against Vancouver and they won against Seattle. Different games, but still huge for the Red Wings. They swept their road trip. We'll talk about that. Updates on Red Wings in terms of their roster, assignments, injuries, things like that. And then we're going to get into the Stanley Cup Playoff standings update, where Detroit sits now in a wildcard spot. Jack Adams in store for Todd McLellan as the Todd father. In Todd we trust. The playoff in hockey, everything kind of comes back to when Todd McLellan came to the team. And we'll be talking about the kids, as usual, on the Red Wings, taking a look at Soderblom and Berggren, especially prospect rankings and some more from the Red Wings before we jump into NHL news before overtime. Before all that, very quickly, the Winged Wheel podcast is primarily supported by our Patreon supporters, patreon.com/Winged Wheel podcast. Not only will you support the show and make everything that we do possible, you'll also get access to our bonus overtime episodes, which record right after these main ones. We let loose, have fun. It's a way different feel, way more casual vibe. We answer any questions that didn't make the main show. We'll usually throw bloopers in there as well, which are good fun. You also get access to our Winged Wheel podcast Patreon exclusive Discord, and you're automatically entered into all of our giveaways. For example, we give away 2 tickets to every Detroit Red Wings home game going directly to our Patreon supporters. So again, patreon.com/Winged Wheel podcast. Jumping into this with the Vancouver game, which happened Sunday night. Our last episode recorded and posted Sunday by midday. So that evening, the Red Wings played in Vancouver, and that was a gnarly schedule. That was a lot of games in a short amount of time. And for Detroit, it was 2 games in under 24 hours, actually. 3 games in 4 days. Playing Calgary the day before, and you could see it on them against Vancouver. Like, they got their goals. They got 2 goals to bring it to overtime, but still, even with holding the 2-1 lead, Detroit was not the better team in this game.
They looked awful. Understandably so. Like, we're all aware of the 3 games in 4 days with travel, different time zone. They really had their backs against it. Nobody would have blamed them if they came out and laid an egg, which they did. But the goalie can steal you some games from time to time. Your superstars only have to make 1 or 2 key plays to get you 1 or 2 key goals. It's weird to say the Red Wings acted like a great team in a game where they played awful, but good teams find ways to win when they're bad. And they were capital B bad that night. So you get a lot of saves, you get a couple timely goals, and somehow you're walking away with a win.
You also got a Moritz Seider reverse hit on Dakota Joshua, which was nice to see. I love that players are still trying that.
And he's a big boy.
Yeah, oh yeah.
He's a big boy.
That was not an easy one. And that's probably why he went for it. He's like, yeah, I'm a big guy. Keep trying it. So the game ends up 3-2 in overtime for Detroit. How we got there, Pius Suter scores on what was a 50-50 high stick, not high stick. Someone asked the question why Detroit didn't get a penalty after the referees reviewed it and determined it was a good goal. It was actually because that review was initiated by the refs. They called the goal on the ice and then they said, yeah, we're not certain. And I like that. I like that the refs did that. Not everything needs to be gamified with the challenge. Like, if you as the ref are not 100% confident, absolutely. So it could have gone either way. Pius Suter, 14th goal of the year for Pius Suter.
I saw a comparison made to a current Red Wings center that was a free agent the same summer as well, and I got very upset. I do miss Pius Suter.
I have all the time in the world for Suter. And there's a little bit of vindication for me because I said I could see him earning a bigger contract if his depth scoring continues. And he didn't leaving the Red Wings, but I could see him getting not like a $6-7 million deal, but just something, in that middle range. I think he'll do it. Alex DeBrincat scores his 22nd of the year to tie it in the first after he gets time and space coming down the middle. Andrew Kopp smartly driving the net, creating that space for him. And DeBrincat, who has been great this year for the most part, in terms of his shooting, the odd game here and there where it looks like he's missing, but DeBrincat made no mistake there and fired it home. That was 1-1. And in the second period, Berggren and Soderblom assisting a Ben Chiarot goal. Berggren doing great to pick up the puck out of the corner, find Chiarot, across the ice at the other side of the point, and then Chiarot's shot just got through what is probably the toughest screen in the NHL, which is Rasmussen and Soderblom. Like, good luck seeing around that.
Yeah, I actually saw a couple different accounts post good breakdowns of Berggren specifically on that play, because you have an undersized winger and there's this expectation that they're really going to struggle along the boards and really struggle in cycle. And he did an excellent job as that puck was coming down low, like being rimmed along the boards, of getting in between his man and the puck and not playing the puck too early, letting it get past him, and thus on the opposite side of the defender to pick up that puck, a couple quick strides, defenseman over commits, hard cut back, and now all of a sudden this little tiny winger has the puck and time and space, which he finds Chiarot for the cross ice pass. Like, it's little nuances like that can make a guy who's never going to win a physical battle win physical battles, because he finds a way to basically avoid it in that situation. And it was a beautiful play to set up what turned out to be a very key goal.
There's been a lot of talk about Berggren as he's been developing as a player, and we're going to talk more about him later as well. But that confidence to play that way, where it's like he's not succumbing to the idea of this is all I am and I have to play this way, and then he fizzles out and becomes like any other talented, smaller guy in the league. Like, no, you see him embracing what the Red Wings wanted to instill in him in the start, and you get the kind of plays like Brad just described. And he's playing confident. Like, that kid is feeling it right now, and you see like he feels like part of the team. He feels like he belongs on the Red Wings. And not that you want him to lose the I have to prove something. Like, you always want that chip on your shoulder. But at the same time, like, he's not in his own head, and he's really kind of just embracing the role he's in. And that's why he's on a point streak right now, too. You're seeing it all over the ice.
The third line, we'll call it the third line, Berggren, Soderblom, Rasmussen. We've talked about the Red Wings needing depth scoring badly because it has not been there this year. Scored every game of the road trip. Every single game they got at least one.
You love it. The Red Wings get scored on by Philip Hedl, and it was one of those goals where you're like, yeah, was there a defensive breakdown? Did they move across the high danger area too easily? Maybe, but that one probably should have been stopped.
I have a hard time blaming a goalie on a shot that finds a hole when you have to move east-west that much. Because that play came right across the zone. Not as quick as a pass would, but at no point could Lyon get set there. So you would like it to be saved, but I understand why it wasn't.
So Detroit gets this thing to overtime. And again, like we just talked about 2 Red Wings goals and how great Berggren was. Don't get it twisted. This was in the McLellan era, and for, very human, physical fatigue factors. Like, the team looked sloppy. They looked tired. They looked gassed. The execution wasn't there, but they weren't good. And once they got that point, I went, wow, that's a miracle. And it's going to take another one. I think you said, Brad, it's going to take another one to win this. And what's funny is Red Wings fans had that perspective. And then if you saw Vancouver fan comments, they were like, oh God, here comes another Vancouver Canucks overtime. Apparently they just suck 3-on-3. And the Red Wings, on a patented Raymond across his body the other way to Alex DeBrincat play, they win it in overtime. DeBrincat, his second goal of the game, 23rd of the year. Raymond just, that's a difference maker right there. We've talked ad nauseum about it. And the Red Wings, as Brad said at the top of this, like, they found a way to win a game even though they weren't the better team, and that's what gets you into the playoffs, or at least the race. And what a moment for Detroit to steal those 2 points.
Just a feel-good win. Again, it kind of reminded me of, remember that game in Toronto last season where the bus got to the arena like right before warm-ups? They couldn't get into rhythm. The game was sloppy. They played bad, but they won, and you could see and feel the excitement on the bench of like, holy hell, we just pulled that off.
Oh yeah, and people were making fun of the Red Wings for celebrating it, and it's like, no,
yeah,
man.
I got that vibe from this game. They're like, oh my God, we actually somehow snuck this one out.
So that actually catapulted Detroit, because they actually had some favorable results in the East for once in the other games in around that time. After that game, wildcard won. They were in the first wildcard spot, and not the first time this season they've been in a playoff spot or anything like that. And they've been in the mix, for a little while now with this win streak as it's been extending. But wildcard won, with Columbus having won as much as they did. You're above Tampa, you're above Montreal, who's fallen back down to earth a little bit. Massive for Detroit.
And it's probably worth pointing out, they're in the first wild card on points. They would still be in a playoff spot on points percentage. I think them and Tampa flip-flop, but either way, whatever metric you want to use, they're there.
And then you look at the analysis, and this is normal for, you see a team that goes on now 2 7-game win streaks, but since December 29th, the Red Wings have been, by points and points percentage, the top team in the NHL in terms of their performance. So that was huge, and you're like, wow, we talked about going into this road trip, 4 out of 8 possible points would be phenomenal. They had that after the first 2 games, and then they got 6 against Vancouver. You're like, these are already stolen points.
And then they're going into Seattle, and it's, probably, definitely the weakest of the teams they're going to play. Is this a trap game? Have they used up all the emotional energy that they had to get through Vancouver? And pleasantly surprised they did not.
It helped that Seattle sucks.
They're bad.
It's not the first time we've said that this year. Seattle's just bad. And that helps. But even by the end of the game, like when Detroit had a 4-2 lead that went away, you were like, yeah, this has been a grind. They've been fatigued. They need to get back home. They need to get their rest. I'm thankful for them that they have one more game only before the Four Nations break. But then other than Larkin and Raymond, they get a Four Nations face-off break there. So team gets to shake off whatever's nagging them or anything, but they walk into Seattle and anything here is gravy on top. 5-4 win in a shootout. It's a little cruel, 2 shootouts and an overtime, I think, on this stretch here for the Red Wings. So that's a lot of hockey to be playing, especially when you're on the road. If you're staying up late to cover the games, again, we said this last episode. I liked this when I was a kid, not anymore. But Detroit wins 5-4, and all in all, was it a perfect effort? No, but they, in my mind, were the better team and played their game to an impressive degree considering it was the end of the road trip.
Yeah. All the same excuses as Vancouver. Again, I would say they were better this game than they were Vancouver, but it was far from a masterpiece. This time it wasn't so much the goaltending that stole them the game as it was just clutch goals from the guys you would expect. Your superstar players, Lucas Raymond, Mo Seider, Elmer Soderblom.
That's right.
The usual suspects.
Jonatan Berggren. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's, again, that third line, they got something there. And it's even better because it's not like all of a sudden Comfer and Fisher started clicking. It's like 3 guys that should pencil into the long-term future of this team are clicking in a depth role. And I mean, when you just put the measuring tape next to Rasmussen and Soderblom, that's enough reason to give you hope that line could be something.
It's like the forward version of pairing Johansson and Edvinsson. Like, you hang on to that for as long as you can, and you're losing a little bit of the sense of, this is temporary, and you're gaining something of, some or all of these guys could potentially make a case to stay together, or at least on this team's future for a while yet. So the Red Wings open scoring, Lucas Raymond redirecting a Larkin shot, Kasper factoring into that play as well. Kasper doing a lot of hard work, and he's getting a lot of attention from the other team. You notice that? Like, they're dogging him. They have the tape on him, and they're saying this guy is, a beast to play against in the corner. He'll go hard. Don't be fooled by size or whatever. Like, he is tough to play against. And I don't want to call it the punk test. It's not necessarily the punk test, but they are giving him some snarl in a lot of games for Kasper.
It's not an uncommon tactic to try to throw a rookie off their game.
No. Yeah, absolutely. And credit to Kasper. He's doing it against, the toughest defensive minutes he possibly can and against the other team's top players. So he's holding up well. The Kraken tie it up. Matty Beniers scores in front. The puck comes out in front. He just had a easy one-time full wind-up. Simple for him to tie it there. And then Mo Seider on the power play to end the first period. Face-offs. 2 goals off the draw in this game. Mo Seider gets the puck and does an excellent job to fire it home. Good rip, but Alex DeBrincat coming in to help on the draw. The effort to win that puck back after Larkin took the face-off was excellent as well. So that's well and good. The Red Wings are up 2-1. Shane Wright ties it in the second period, 2-2. He goes down, he rips one past Talbot. Was it the best goal in the world? Maybe it was a snipe, maybe it should have been stopped. Whatever. That's not the important part of the play. Michael Rasmussen had just gone down the left side boards into Seattle's zone, and Fleury went in for a hit, was obviously going to miss, kind of stuck his arm or shoulder out, was obviously going to miss, stuck his skate out to the point where his skate was in the air and a little bit blade first. Like, he's lucky that wasn't a way worse situation. Like, foot to foot, blade to foot, trips Rasmussen. There's a lot of Rasmussen to see. When you see just his foot get hit and clobbered like that, and then he falls, not a hard call to make. No call in the play. They go down, immediately scored. And then it pans to McLellan, who's justifiably like angry, pissed off at the refs. And he's saying, you can read his lips. He's saying, well, you think he fell? He just fell? Like, he fell on his own? It was so stupid. I hate just making the focus of a game the refs, but the refs that game were, that was a tough look for them. That call was non-call was atrocious.
That was the worst non-call I've seen in a Red Wings game since a Seattle player threw his stick at the puck last year.
What is it with the Kraken games and missing obvious ones?
I have a theory. I haven't quite figured out the connection between the Kraken and the Kansas City Chiefs, but it's there and I will find it.
The Kraken would love a connection. They'd love to win a little more. They'd love to get a little bit more national attention. Taylor Swift's taken. They have to find, maybe they one of their players dates Sabrina Carpenter or something.
Well, Seattle, so Dave Grohl.
Well, he's had a little bit of an issue of dating too many people lately.
Yes. Well, even the Gustafsson penalty too. I can't remember who that was on the Kraken, but
yeah,
man, was that a bit of a yard sale, and Gustafsson was calling that out.
It was Tanev. Yeah, it was Tanev.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, and it was just so performative. It was just disgusting to see.
We have the photographic evidence that Brandon Tanev sees ghosts, though, so we can't confirm.
I don't understand.
Oh, remember his NHL pick, like his player picture?
he does
where his
the
eyes
picture
are wide
yes,
open?
yes.
Yeah, you should look him up.
He
Yes.
might have just seen one in that moment, got spooked. Gustafsson happened to be in the area. We don't know for sure. We'll give him the benefit of the doubt.
Fair enough.
Gustafsson's reaction was hysterical. No way. He's laughing.
It was so bad.
If his hands were up in there and you want to call that, that's fine. But honestly, the moment a guy like flails like that for what would be like a turn of the new CBA style hook, we're calling everything no, you got to give him the embellishment at that point.
You have to. It was so bad. Yeah, the reffing in that game was just really off.
Berggren scores his 9th of the year on the power play. Again, a goal off the faceoff, cop to Berggren. Berggren, time and space, rips it. Definition of feeling it right now, that guy. And in the third period, Elmer Soderblom, who is now, as of this goal that he scored on a 5-game point streak, Berggren on a 4-game point streak, I believe, if I have that right. But Soderblom, now on a 5-game point streak, in front and gets a great pass from Veleno, where it was a quick play, puck in front, and Veleno, while being defended, bodied, just makes a smart, hard effort, gets the puck to Soderblom nearby, and Soderblom buries it. And the kids leading the way this game, Lucas Raymond, Mo Seider, Berggren, Soderblom, like it's been a theme of the Red Wings.
And that's, we've preached this point a lot, but the most important part of the turnaround with McLellan is it is like you get this veteran coach and you would think he's gonna have his veteran bias like every other coach in his position does. He's getting the most out of the young guys, which is exactly what you want for sustainability of success this year and going forward.
And it's an important thing. We're going to talk about McLellan more here, but it's an important thing to call out that he wasn't necessarily always like that, or at least if you talk to fans of teams that he coached previous, they said at points that was a crutch of his, which was the typical you lean on the veterans kind of thing. Now, circumstances dictating a lot of this. He has the freedom and the ability to do that. Like that's the license that the Red Wings wanted him to take with the young guys, but it's not an easy transition to make. So a fantastic sign that he's, shown that he's learning and growing as a coach too, in a way that Detroit needed right away. The rest of the game in regulation was a mix of Seattle working their way back, whether you think the goal should have gone in or not. I don't think it was the best defensive moments from, Seider and Chiarot, for example, or there was a couple of Johansson plays, but it became 4-4, and you're like, yeah, this between that and Joy Decord just making some outstanding saves, being rock solid for Seattle, you're like, maybe this is the end of the road for the Red Wings win streak, because it really does feel like this is just too much of a grind on them. Makes it to overtime, nothing doing, makes it to a shootout, and boy, was that a treat for Detroit. Nothing for Beniers, nothing for Raymond, nothing for Shane Wright. Patrick Kane has an opportunity to score the first goal of the shootout. Patrick Kane returning to the lineup, not playing big minutes or anything yet. That was a disgusting.
Is that the move he did on Kosa in training camp?
Maybe it was Kosa. I know he's done it before.
He did it in training camp, and everyone was like, oh my God.
I was never a strong shooter in hockey, and I've always had so much admiration for guys who could not just get a quick shot off without setting, not just the deception, but the quickness. But the angle at which he does that with the backhand is disgusting.
It's a low percentage shot for even good hockey players. Because you're when you go to the backhand on a breakaway or a shootout or whatever, the advantage of that is you go from your forehand to your backhand, which in and of itself is like a 6, 7, 8 foot movement, but you're usually skating in that direction with a change of direction ahead of time. Like you fake the one way, then you cut. So you're turning this 6 to 8 foot move into a 10 to 12 foot move. And it's impossible for the goalie to keep up with if you do it right. Kane skates straight at the goalie. His legs barely move, and he's just bringing his stick cross-body and just pinpoint accurate. It doesn't make sense. I mean, it does. It's just incredibly difficult.
And if you're a goalie, like, you could be set, you could be like picture perfect in terms of where you're supposed to be, but there are moves and there are shots where it's like if the player gets it like pixel perfect where they're supposed to place that shot, you're not going to stop it. And Kane has that kind of weight where you're like, that's a low percentage shot for even good players, not a low percentage shot for what is now, with that goal, the most successful shootout players in terms of number of goals scored in NHL history. I believe that was 53 for him, which gives him the most of all time. Absolutely unreal. The next attempt by Seattle doesn't go through, and the Red Wings win that in a shootout. Phenomenal result for them. They sweep the road trip. They keep their wild card 1 spot, and everything from the shootout to the kids contributing in that game. Like, obviously they went 4 for 4, but the Red Wings could not have asked for more, and they got some extra from that trip.
It's crazy to think that, we looked at this road trip saying, this is going to be a real test. There are some true playoff teams with Seattle at the end. So you get a little bit of break at the end of that road trip, but you're so tired from playing all the good teams who play pretty heavy. And the fact that the Red Wings sweep the road trip, it's almost hard to put into words. Like, I wouldn't have expected this in my wildest dreams.
And it's nice, too, because now they got a bunch of days off, and they're not sitting and stewing on a loss or a couple of crappy games. They get to sit there with their confidence at an all-time high when they're just alone with their thoughts. So, hopefully that translates to the Tampa game, and then...
You doing okay? Is their drive home going to be okay, Brad?
No, but we're getting there.
Detroit on their second different 7-game win streak under Todd McLellan, who's been here for 20 games. Yeah, he's been here for 20 games. They're 15-4-1 under Todd McLellan, including 2 different 7-game win streaks.
Teams are lucky to get one of those a year.
Well, this is the first 7-game win streak, or 2, but even counting singles, since 2012?
I think I saw something like that, yeah.
It had been a minute since the Red Wings had one, and then they get 2 in basically a month.
Thank you, Todd. So we are going to talk more about where they are in the playoff positioning and the sustainability of this and all that fun stuff. Some quick notes before we take a quick break here is Jeff Petry, who's been out for a long time, was placed on IR. It was reported that he had surgery. He's been out since January 2nd, had surgery, would miss 6 to 8 weeks. So this is just another classic, NHL team putting their best players on LTIR. He'll come back for the playoffs, and it's going to be the same thing that Vegas always does. In all seriousness, I know the Red Wings were looking forward to potentially having Petry back. Even if you don't want to split up Johansson and Edvinsson, which you don't do right now, Petry on the third pair is actually a fit. And you look at Hall, who's been struggling. Petry back would have been nice, but he'll be out for a while there. So we'll see how that one goes. Also, massive apologies to Jeff Petry. We posted that graphic today of where Detroit was before McLellan came in.
Yeah.
And it was just
whoever created that really sewered him.
Well, I'm not talented enough to create the graphics, but we work with one of our good friends and part of the team here at the Winged Wheel podcast to create the graphics, and made the smart decision. You just find someone with a very sad face and you find someone with a happy face. And Petry just happened to have an image where he was making a very sad face, and everyone just thought it was a dunk on Petry. And I'm like, we've dunked on Petry a lot on the show. That's not what this was meant to be. So with apologies to Jeff, who's recovering from surgery, that wasn't nice.
He's not coming on the pod anytime soon.
Sorry, man.
Until we take that graphic down.
Oh, it wasn't the point. It was about focus on Larkin cheering. Anyways, so that is some news there on Jeff Petry. And then quickly here, Dominik Shine sent down to the Grand Rapids Griffins as the team approaches a lot of days off and players are getting healthier. And I mean, the first game Shine came out, I think a lot of people were thinking the same thing, which was take out Tarasenko instead. It's been a tough watch. He's had his moments, Tarasenko, but for the most part, you're like, yeah.
Todd is trying so hard to get Tarasenko going. They're trying him on every single possible combination, and it's just not working.
When do we hit the Mean Girls point with him? Stop trying to make it happen. It's never going to happen.
But here's the thing. We would have said that about different aspects of the Red Wings before Todd McLellan came in, and he's on a 2-year. So unless something happens from a managerial standpoint, which you might see, you try to get rid of that contract or a buyout, or you attach a late pick or something to it, that might come down the road. But as long as he's on the team and he's not waived, we've seen as crazy of things happen with McLellan and him turning guys around. So maybe, but yeah, it's not been.
I'm not saying we're at that point yet. I'm just saying we're past the opening sequence of the movie.
Definitely are. And you know what? Shine, glad for him to get an NHL paycheck for that period of time. And you know what he can bring. He's an option. I hope to see him back up, whether that's sooner or later. I thought he brought good energy. He brought a hit from time to time and did more than fine in his role to sub in for Detroit when they needed him.
He got to live his childhood dream for a little bit, and like you said, I hope he gets called back up, because when he was in the lineup and with the small amounts of ice time he got every game, I thought he made the most of it. So yeah, super thrilled for him, and just a great experience.
All right, more after the break, but first let's hear from the sponsors of the Winged Wheel podcast. When you think about fast food, you probably think about unhealthy, thawed-out patties dripping with grease, the kind of thing Evan likes to eat. But when you're on a tight schedule and need to save time, like when we have to record emergency podcast episodes, you might not have any other option. If this sounds familiar, you need to check out Tempo. Tempo can provide you with protein-packed fuel to save time without compromising your health goals or your episodes. Tempo is a weekly meal delivery service that brings fresh, chef-crafted meals right to your door. These aren't your average frozen dinners. Tempo meals are fully prepared, portioned perfectly, and designed by dietitians to be both delicious and nutritious. We tried Tempo out and we were huge fans. We loved the fact that there was so much variety, all while still meeting our nutrition goals. We went for the protein-packed options, and the meals were genuinely outstanding. Fan favorites had to be the spinach artichoke chicken with farro and the sweet and tangy chicken. The best part, though, no prep, no mess. Just heat them up in the microwave and enjoy in 3 minutes. For a limited time, Tempo is offering our listeners 60% off your first box. Go to tempomeals.com/wingedwheel. That's tempomeals.com/wingedwheel for 60% off your first box. tempomeals.com/wingedwheel. Rules and restrictions may apply. Welcome back. The Detroit Red Wings are in a playoff spot. The Detroit Red Wings are in the first of 2 wildcard spots, and the Detroit Red Wings could potentially be looking at a divisional seed. I'm trying to goad you guys into getting clipped again this year. I want you to know that.
I found my loophole, and I think I mentioned it off air. I'm going to mention it on air because it's not my words, but I was listening to another hockey podcast. They, unironically, were talking about the possibility that Ottawa or Detroit gets home ice advantage in the first round, because Toronto is not that far away.
The Detroit Red Wings have 61 points in 54 games.
They play Ottawa 2 more times, and the last game of the year against the Toronto Maple Leafs.
The Ottawa Senators in the 3rd divisional seed in the Atlantic, 62 points in 54 games, so just 1 point ahead. They do have 1 more regulation win, so that tiebreaker is getting close. You're getting to multiple tiebreakers there. And the Toronto Maple Leafs in the 2nd divisional seed in 53 games played, 1 fewer than Detroit and Ottawa, have 66 points. So Detroit's 5 points back, could be 7 after the game in hand, but they are firmly in this mix. Now, right behind them, you have Tampa in the 2nd wildcard spot with 60 points, Boston with 60 points, Columbus 59, the Islanders 57, the Canadiens 55, Rangers 54. It's like Detroit's on a 7-game heater. Another team could go on a 5-game heater in this flip. So it's tight in all directions, but still, like, you're looking at the Red Wings in a playoff position as of right now, and they're not just looking to keep the teams below out. It's possible they are playing in a 2-3 matchup if they make the playoffs.
I don't think it's going to happen.
This is the man who got clipped with the Curb Your Enthusiasm music last year.
But I forget which website it was, had the one that does the pie chart playoff odds.
Money Puck, yeah.
The Red Wings were literally a 50-50. Like, that's crazy. We were
I
talking
think December it was like 3%.
Yeah.
Even Dom's model on The Athletic, it's typically lower than Money Puck is on the Red Wings. They use different ways of running their analyses. The Red Wings are up to 24% on that model. They were I think they were at 2 or 3% when we were talking to Max the other day.
Yeah, Dom, I know he does a chart where he's ranks the teams not only by their percentages, but by like category, and he had the Red Wings in out of it. And now they're in the thick of it. They're in it. They're right there. It's, again, tempering optimism because, again, you look at the underlyings, there's some things they have improved, some warning lights are still going off, but they're in it.
Yeah. And the Red Wings still have the hardest strength of schedule for the rest of the year across the entire NHL, I believe. So the same thing before this road trip, we're going to say now, the odds are stacked against them. Now, the good thing is we are not watching the Red Wings just goalie teams for 7 straight games. They got some help from their goalies, and they got some luck by playing bad teams or teams who blew it. And that's part of hockey, but it's not like, points of last season and then points at the start of this season where we were saying, this is well and good, we're going to enjoy it, but something has to change because this isn't sustainable. The 5-on-5 offense isn't all of a sudden incredible, and the penalty kill isn't all of a sudden incredible, and the power play is not still firing at like 70% or something insane over a short stretch. But you've seen meaningful changes in the way the Red Wings play, where within the means of the players they have, they are doing what they can on the ice and adjusting their game based on their opponent. And Todd McLellan has extracted more out of Marco Kasper, out of Albert Johansson, Elmer Soderblom, who's playing a much revived and different game than the first time we saw him, is making an impact. Like, these things combined with the goalieing and the luck is what's making this feel like, yeah, you're not going to win every game the rest of the year, but you can see how it could be sustainable enough where down to game 82, Detroit's going to be one of the names in this conversation again, or they have the opportunity to make it that way.
The conversation, we'll call it after the first heater when McLellan came in, wasn't that the Red Wings' biggest obstacle was the point gap they had to make up between 8th place and wherever they were sitting in like 12th, 13th, 14th at the time. It was how many teams they had to leapfrog. That was the hurdle. Well, they've already hurdled that, pun intended. They're in by points and points percentage now. They just have to outpace the teams behind them. That's it. That's full stop. They don't need to go on a heater and then leapfrog team X, Y, and Z while they're on a heater or whatever. Just be better than the teams behind you. If all these teams turn it back into a mid-off and the Red Wings go 500, they can make the playoffs. If these teams stay hot like they are, the Red Wings have to stay hot. It's a very simple equation now. Be better than the teams behind you, and you're in.
It's not an easy thing to do or say. I look at Columbus and I look at Montreal, and you see the injuries and maybe were they even meant to be up there to start. And I don't see them as out of it, but I'm less scared of what they're doing now just because of what I mentioned with the injuries. Boston, I refuse to go on record saying Boston's ever out of it. They've burned me before for the last 10 years, so no. But you look at the Bostons, you look at both New York teams, and you're like, yeah, there's enough firepower or at least history of winning there where you're going to threaten. So it's as easy as keeping the teams behind you out, but also it's as difficult as that because those are some big names back there.
There's a lot of teams chasing, and a couple of them are going to go on heaters. Again, I see Igor Shesterkin sitting there, and I don't give a crap what you say about the Rangers. That scares the hell out of me if I'm any team ahead of them. Man, I'd be afraid to play the Rangers in the first round of the playoffs, again, because Igor Shesterkin, he has a hot week, and you're a 1 seed, and all of a sudden you're out.
Yeah, even when he's bad, you're like, yeah, are you really bad, though, or are you just doing your weird regular season thing, and all of a sudden you're going to just goalie everyone for a million games in a row?
Exactly, but there might come a time post Four Nations freeze where there's going to be, not might come a time, there will be a time, it's going to be a small window between that and the trade deadline where a lot of these teams have to make decisions. If you're the New York Islanders, you might have one of the most valuable rentals on the market in Brock Nelson. How dedicated are you to this playoff race? Are you keeping him or are you trading him? And the teams that decide that, yeah, even though we're in the thick of it, we're going to sell off a little bit, that benefits the Red Wings because it weakens what's below them. So I have some hope that a couple of these teams will drop off. Just, again, it's a numbers game. But yeah, it's going to be a very difficult task to outpace that many teams still.
The trade deadline will be very interesting because if there's a lot of teams kind of hanging around, there may not be a lot of action, and I feel bad for TSN because they have to try and make a full day out of it. So it'll be very interesting to see who the teams are that believe that they can make a legit push if they're in that sort of mushy middle to take a wild card spot. It'll be really funny when the New York Rangers trade for Elias Pettersson and make their push. The expensive one. I won't say the good or bad. I'll say the expensive one.
The Red Wings right now under Todd McLellan are 15-4-1. If they make the playoffs, I think we all agree he will likely be one of the finalists for the Jack Adams Award for Best Coach of the Year in the NHL. Spencer Carberry is the odds-on favorite by a mile still for what he's doing with the Washington Capitals. Dean Evison, Scott Arniel are the other names in and around there. And then Todd McLellan is starting to move up the list as well. If you look at the betting odds, for example, he's still a plus 3,500. Like he's a far cry from Carberry's favorite at, minus 500. So you can see where the thoughts are in terms of Coach of the Year. As of right now, has McLellan done enough for you to get finalist level voting, so top 3 in Jack Adams voting? Because I do think Todd McLellan, even though he's come in for just 20 games, has done enough to at least earn a lot of votes.
It's been 20 games, though. That's the caveat of it all. What he's done in those 20 games, absolutely. But it's only 20 games. If the Red Wings make the playoffs, I think there's a solid chance he's a finalist. Probably second or third place. Carberry should win this running away because, again, the Capitals weren't expected to be as bad as the Red Wings this year. They weren't expected to be a basement feeder. They are running away with the conference.
And he's unlocked Pierre-Luc Dubois, which was seemingly impossible. So
yeah, they are not just winning, they are dominating. If by some miracle the Red Wings get the 2 seed in the Atlantic, they keep up this 15-4 pace the rest of the season, maybe then he gets in the conversation with Carberry. But I don't think a wild card spot would be enough to get it there. But I think as it stands now, if the Red Wings can play at a 550 to 600 pace the rest of the season, which is not an easy task, I'd call it probably not even likely, he's going to get a lot of love. Again, I think Carberry's going to win it running away, but solid chance he could be the runner-up.
It's a super interesting story and perspective on both those guys, right? Like Washington, pretty not great last year. They get embarrassed in the first round. All Red Wings fans know they barely squeak in. But then they go out and load up in the offseason and they make a massive gamble on Pierre-Luc Dubois that, they're the 8th team that can finally fix him and turn him into a star. So Spencer Carberry's, he's orchestrated all of this, taken these players, and they found success, and he deserves all the credit he can have. But that's a lot of the GMing, right? Like they're bringing in talent to build a good team, whereas the Red Wings are essentially the same team from when Derek Lalonde had them at the start of the year to now when Todd McLellan's been the coach for 20 games. And those 20 games have been so night and day to what we've witnessed before. I find his case stronger than Spencer Carberry's. Obviously, we have an extreme amount of bias, and we don't watch a lot of Capitals games in depth. But I think the Todd McLellan argument for Jack Adams should be super, super strong.
And my final point on this is you're both right in terms of what Carberry has done. And Brad, what you said, it's only been 20 games. You voted at the end of the year. You need to see how this is all going to play out because you can grab pretty good samples from most of the coaches in the running. That said, what have we seen with the Jack Adams a lot of years? And not to diminish anyone's win, because I'm sure I've advocated for the guys who have won those years. But as Evan said, a lot of the times this is a part of a larger picture where the GM did a lot of work in the offseason, or there's forces in there where a player is popping off like you wouldn't have expected that you brought in, Pierre-Luc Dubois, Logan Thompson, or whoever it is. And that's part of it. It all makes for a good coach. Very rarely in the NHL can you isolate for when a coach makes an impact. And with the Red Wings was a perfect storm of all the variables were isolated. Like Evan said, the team is largely the same, if not exactly the same. You have guys doing things differently that they weren't doing previously. And this isn't like a dunk on Derek Lalonde thing, but you have Todd McLellan coming in and making what was seemingly impossible with this roster possible by changing how the players were playing. That almost never happens.
Coach type coaching thing a coach could do.
Like, this isn't the NFL where you can call different plays and run different routes and different protections and blah, blah, blah. Like, in the NHL, it's hard for a coach to make an impact, and he's doing it. So, yeah, of course, it has to sustain some of the success for the rest of the year for him to be in this conversation. But to me, I can't remember very many times over the past decade or so where a coach has had this direct of a measurable, isolated impact on team as Todd McLellan is right now.
100% agree.
In Todd, we trust. Okay, one more player I want to talk about on the Red Wings before we jump into NHL news. You know, we've talked about Kasper in an isolated way. We talked about Johansson in an isolated way. We can do those every game. Elmer Soderblom, who we have talked about before, but still, I think he deserves a conversation here because, you know, you saw him score that goal. That's great. You see him on a 5-game point streak. That's fantastic. You see him laying the body. It's a Montour he blew up in the corner.
As soon as I saw it was a Montour, I was like, he must have listened to that podcast where I said Brandon Montour is the best available free agent defenseman. That's how you hit your little brother when you're playing mini sticks.
Yeah.
If there was drywall behind him, he would have went through it.
Drywall in the corners, NHL, you'll sell tickets so fast. In the NBA, LeBron could end up in the first row. Why not NHL players?
Why not?
Do it NHL. But no, Soderblom
Hold on. Proposed Utah team name. The Utah Kool-Aid Men. Put the drywall in.
Look, man.
If the NHL wants to print money, giant Kool-Aid Man jerseys going through drywall.
If they couldn't get the Yeti trademark, I don't think they're going to get the Kool-Aid Man trademark.
Combine both of them. You say, hey, Yeti, Kool-Aid, Utah, it's going to be a 3-way.
Oh, jeez.
You know, we made it pretty far into the episode before our first one. A partnership here in terms of advertising, you'll sell so many jerseys. Okay, let's talk about Elmer Soderblom, please. We're going to go off the rails fast.
Elmer's been doing quite literally exactly what the Red Wings were hoping for. He's using his size, and it's easy to go through his game and go, he's doing X, he's doing Y, he's doing Z. What he's actually doing that the Red Wings needed is he's not a liability. He's using his weight effectively, and it's resulting in tangible effects on the game. 5-game point streak, not a defensive black hole. Again, we're talking about him in isolation, but that whole line right now, it changes the dynamic of the Red Wings, because if your top line has an off night, there's some hope you might still get some goals. And if you get 2 goals from your third line and a good game from your goalie, all of a sudden the game 2 months ago, you had 0 chance of winning. Maybe you sneak out a 2-1. And again, I understand that this isn't going to last all season for Elmer. 5 games point streak is not going to happen all that often. Hell, if he was playing at a 30-point pace, we'd be ecstatic. But he's doing what they need him to do. It's providing tangible results. And again, they're building towards the future. So it's been quite literally the perfect storm for what the Red Wings were hoping for when they recalled him.
You see him kind of, I don't think he's been hesitant with his physical game, but you've seen him warm up to the idea more and more. Like, you know, in the first games, there would be a scuffle and he'd get in there when he needed to, but he wouldn't really engage. And part of that's also being, like, I have no familiarity with this, neither does Brad, but if you're the biggest guy on the ice or in a scrum, you're going to get targeted in the NHL. That's the nature of it. And someone sees someone the size of Elmer Soderblom, you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to go pick on him. Because if I can win that fight, that's going to get the boys fired up. That's going to get the fans fired up. That's a statement. And if you're Soderblom, you're like, I can't do this 40 times a game. But you see him willing to engage in that game more and more on top of the offensive abilities that Brad brought in. Like, that is what the Red Wings wanted. And I really liked what you mentioned now and earlier in the show when you're like, he's part of a line that is now working. Like, a big issue, even when the Red Wings have been winning this year, has been depth hasn't been reliably there in any kind of configuration that was steady. Like, you had to keep jumbling things up. And over time, that disrupts your lines above you because eventually you're going to try to spread some talent down there. And the Red Wings didn't have that luxury because they just didn't have enough 5-on-5 offense. So if you're going to be part of something that's going to work in your bottom six, I don't think the Red Wings were counting on that this year. And as of right now, I'm like, you don't take Elmer Soderblom out. I used to cry way more hysterics when the Red Wings would pull a young guy out for a veteran who got healthy. And I'd be like, this is irredeemable. You shouldn't do that. And then over time, you understand, like, it's just part of the game. But as of right now, based on what the Red Wings are doing, you don't pull Soderblom out and you give him as much run as he earns. And right now, that track is long.
We've spent most of the season talking about how the top six, for the most part, at least in recent memory, has been set. There's no other configuration. You're not going to change it, et cetera, et cetera. And then everything below that is interchangeable and replaceable. Well, that six, as of now, is a 9 because you're not breaking up Berggren, Rasmussen, Soderblom until they give you a reason to. And even then, they've been so good, they've probably got some grace to have a few off nights with the hope that they'll get it back together. And, you know, it sucks for Tarasenko, Mott, Fisher, Veleno, Comfer when he's back, but you're just rotating those 3 on the 4th line for now. That's got to be the formula. And again, Soderblom arguably is the biggest reason for it on that 3rd line.
And that's how it should be, right? Like, if you are going to be not a true contender, it's next man up mentality. And when the next 3 guys up, like the 3rd line for the Red Wings have been productive, that squeezes everybody else out. It's just the nature of the business. It's the nature of how this team's built right now. And I think going back to Soderblom, one of the biggest issues I've always had is his inconsistency and his lack of, engagement in the game from time to time. And now we're seeing it. So if, those are things that take a long time to figure out and you're going to have to see over a long period of time. But so far, his tenure with the Red Wings this season has been excellent.
I love this theme of we are just picking whichever Red Wings prospect we want to talk. We could have talked about Berggren. And obviously not the same situation as Soderblom, but Berggren and what he's been able to do. And you can go back and talk about Kasper a bunch of times and Johansson as he continues to go. Like, you talk about McLellan, like, this has been a big, big theme of it. It's not just, your Canes or your veterans.
I wonder how much of Soderblom's success thus far, and, remains to be seen as the season progresses, is because there's familiar faces in the locker room now. When you see Elmer Soderblom score, the happiest person on the ice is Simon Edmundson. He goes over there. It's all, laughs and hugs and everyone's having a great time. Will be curious to see if that's sort of unlocked a level of comfort for Elmer in the locker room at the NHL level because he's got guys he's played with in Grand Rapids there now.
We could go a level deeper on that. It's not just Soderblom. Edmundson,
yep,
Berggren, Johansson, to an extent, Kasper. What's the theme there?
Well, Bob Kaiser put out a picture on Twitter today, and it was him and all the guys who'd played in Grand Rapids who are now in Detroit, and there was 10 guys.
They were all Swedish, and Kasper played in the SHL. Like, it is like familiarity, and it breeds comfort. It actually might be a thing. Why Edmundson and Johansson and Berggren and Soderblom are thriving, because not only are they in this boat of, I'm the young guy on a team trying to establish myself, 3 of their countrymen are right there in the same boat. Like, it is probably a little easier on them to make the transition with all of them around.
Okay. That's our Red Wings topics. Let's jump into NHL news. And there's a good amount to talk about. And I think the topic that the hockey world is talking about today is the NHL player poll that was released by The Athletic. Always a fun one, and some interesting responses in there. Some that weren't surprising, some that actually were. But we'll go through it here. I'll link to the article. It's always great work by The Athletic. They do this. The first one, basically, they polled a certain amount of players.
I think it was 111 was what I read.
Not all of them answered every question. They'll tell you how many answered it, but 111 players. They got anonymity, so you don't know who said what. But the first question, if you have a no-trade list, what's the first team on it? Obvious first answer is the Winnipeg Jets.
Yeah.
Winnipeg Jets, Buffalo Sabres, San Jose Sharks, Calgary Flames, Ottawa Senators, Anaheim Ducks, New York Rangers. Other was 11%. The Jets made up almost 49% of the responses.
Oh, poor Winnipeg.
Other was 11%. And
does other in future considerations know each other?
yeah, they're cousins. The Red Wings weren't listed as one of the teams in the responses. That doesn't mean nobody has the Red Wings on their list, but of the 82 that responded to this, like, none of it was the Red Wings.
Almost half the league was mentioned by at least one player. 0 votes for the Red Wings. That is not insignificant because you look at the teams that got the most votes. It's one of two things, if not both. Terrible market. Sorry, Winnipeg. We know what winter's like there. I wouldn't want to live there. Or terrible team. San Jose and Anaheim, geographically, unreal destinations. Garbage hockey teams, so people put them on their no-trade list. Buffalo, well, sorry. Detroit, you can argue, we love the city of Detroit, but it's not a Tampa Bay, a Florida, a Los Angeles, a San Jose.
A Vegas.
But they're not a Buffalo, Anaheim, San Jose anymore. They're a historic franchise on the upswing, and players might be
with a
recognizing.
new-ish arena.
Yes, that was, I mean, down the line, you'll see the facilities are very, very popular across the league.
We might be underselling the thought of the Red Wings as a destination. I don't think they're in the upper tier with some of the very obvious markets that we mention all the time with this, but
I don't
think we've seen it in our lifetimes where the Red Wings were a top 5 destination in the NHL.
But the thing is, the upper tier is made up of places who have geographical or weather or maybe some tax advantages and whoever's winning. Look, hey, no disrespect to Connor McDavid and his heated driveway, but Edmonton, Alberta is not a top destination of cities, even if you want to visit Canada. So,
only Canadian team not mentioned on that poll.
Because they have Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. Players want to go there. If you're winning, you're a destination in the NHL. And Detroit not only has the winning, but they have the history of success. They have the legacy. They have a lot of things that Brad mentioned there, where if Detroit wins, they will be in the top tier. I firmly believe that. You don't have a higher floor like a Florida or Tampa or Vegas would have, but if you're winning, players would not hesitate to go there.
There's also the media and fan pressure and microscope that can deter players too, right? Like, not everybody's built to play in Montreal. Not everybody's built to play in Toronto. Apparently not everybody's built to play in Vancouver either. So there's things like that too that all boil into this poll, and this one's very interesting.
He's talking to you, Max. Don't ruin this for us.
That's right.
What coach would you most like to play for other than your own? No surprises at the top of that list. John Cooper, Paul Maurice, Rod Brind'Amour. Craig Berube, actually, I thought was, for a guy who's known as hard-nosed, it's good to see him there. Pete DeBoer. Torts at 3.77%, and like that list is in order. But at that point, it's like, is John Cooper with almost 24%, Paul Maurice at 13%, and then the list starts to dwindle. What coach would you not like to play for, or least like to play for? 38.5% is John Tortorella.
Shocking.
Then you have Bruce Cassidy, Mike Babcock, who is not even in the league anymore.
I have to put that on there just in case.
Is tied with a current NHL coach, Greg Cronin, for third, which was hysterical. And I mean, you talk about, not wanting to play in certain situations. We saw at the end of Mike Babcock's tenure in Detroit, players did not want to come to Detroit in free agency because of Mike Babcock. So that legacy lives on. Which NHL team has the best facilities for opposing teams? And this is what Brad was talking about, because with almost 25% of the poll, the Detroit Red Wings in Little Caesars Arena.
New arena. I wonder what that poll would have looked like when it was the last year of the Joe.
Yeah, not the same. I wonder if they had the troughs in the.
Yeah, I was going to say, you think the players didn't enjoy the troughs?
So they love the troughs.
I miss the Joe, man. The bottom of my shoes are definitely a lot less sticky when I leave the LCA, but I miss the Joe.
I saw the funniest comment on the internet, and they were like, they should have done one bathroom in the LCA that was a throwback to the Joe, and it was troughs, like just
oh god, yeah,
just looked exactly like the Joe.
They
should have done one bathroom.
They just
like that.
pay employees to make sure to stand in line so it looks like it's 112 people long at all times.
You don't need to.
Do you think no one would use it?
I'd use it.
I think I'd only use it. I would.
You would walk to wherever it is?
I would defer the urinals. I'm a trough guy, you know?
Oh, quote of the day. Right there. Just coming in late. The Seattle Kraken, Edmonton Oilers, Vegas Golden Knights, New York Islanders, Utah. Those ones are,
all new arenas for the most part.
And then the Montreal Canadiens, which is the Bell Center, is a religious experience.
Who's at the bottom?
Yeah.
This was the most lopsided of the polls.
65.71%.
Oh my God.
Said Carolina Hurricanes had the worst.
Is their arena really that bad?
Guess
It
so.
must be. And I heard commentary today that was lower than
That was
they were
being
expecting.
nice?
That was being nice.
It's not great when you have an owner who has a reputation of not wanting to spend money.
I'm going to have to do some Googling once we're done here. Take a deep dive in how bad it is, because I would have not suspected that at all.
Hey, Miko, you want to stay in Carolina where it's the worst facilities, or you want to come to Detroit where there's the best facilities? Miko Ranson into the Detroit campaign has already started.
You know what? I'm sure that's the number one thing on his list when he's looking at his future team.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And then the rest of the questions here are interesting. It's all kind of 45-55. In-season tournament like the NBA? No, 55%. Is the season too long? No, 58%. More money for the players. Should Gary Bettman retire? 55% yes.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah, boys.
God bless anonymity.
You never capitulate to the opposition, even if you like the guy. It's the same thing as fans booing. Was it Vegas that didn't boo Bettman because they're just so pumped that they got their cup? No, man. You have to boo him. Shame on you if you don't. Anyways, that was interesting. The Buffalo Sabres and the hit on Tage Thompson by Stefan Nason, and it was an ugly hit. He got tossed from the game, and there was absolutely no response from the Sabres. And you thought about the hit way back in the day, Lucic on Ryan Miller, their goaltender. Again, pathetic response. And you're like, wow, you're still doing this?
I was going to bring that up
later?
because that was the original punk test in terms of hockey, was when the Sabres did nothing after a noted goon absolutely blew up their goalie. And here we are again. We talk about destinations and what makes a team, a desirable destination. It can be winning. It can be locale, history, unlimited finances, whatever you want. Buffalo, I love that city. Again, much like Detroit, I think it's underrated, but it's not going to be a destination. And they've lost so much for so long. That team needs to be a culture team, or they have no shot. No shot.
You can see them reeling because they had all these meetings of they had a team meeting apparently on Monday where they addressed that no one stood up for Tage Thompson, and Tuck said what happened last game will happen again, and Dylan Cousins said, as I think there's a lot of guys who wish they were on the ice when that happened. And that's, first off, when I heard that, I'm like, it doesn't matter. If you're in the NHL, you might not like it, but if you're Brad size and you're on the ice and you're going to get pummeled by someone, you still have to answer it. You can choose to not, but there's going to be a price to pay in terms of the culture on your team and what happens the next time the punk test comes up. If you don't get in there, if you get punched in the face, it's unfortunate, but that's the pro game.
I'm sorry. Are you a big boy or not?
Are you making millions of dollars in the NHL?
You go over there and you get your face caved in.
And
be a man.
Unironically, hockey players are stupid, but they're not stupid. If they see someone just tiny and scrawny and absolutely with no chance in a fight like Ryan, go in there to a fight in this situation to stick up for a teammate, get his face caved in, his teammates are still going to be fired up saying, attaboy, way to go. We know that is not your thing. We respect the effort, and it will still serve the purpose you want it to serve. Now, if you lose the fight bad enough, someone might have to go out later in the game do it again properly. Might have to go for round 2, but either way, you don't have to win the fight. It's a show of, I'm doing this to support my teammate. Tage Thompson almost had his head ripped off. He's one of the few Buffalo Sabres who's actually good this year. Like, we talked about this during the absolute throes of the Red Wings rebuild, where this was a problem for them. They were bad and they were failing the puck test. They can't fix being bad overnight. You can fix that in a damn hurry, and it feels like we're going on 15 years of the Sabres not figuring this out.
Didn't Rasmus Dahlin fight a teammate in practice?
Yeah.
Why can't they just do that against the opponents?
Well, I mean, they did have a response against the Columbus Blue Jackets, who had nothing to do with the Devils game.
Well, they've won 4 in a row, so something works.
Totally. But you know when there's always a story with the team? That's what the Sabres have been in for the decade.
They've got a musk about them, there's always something going on with that team, and they never smell right.
Yeah. Fighting Olivier off the draw in Columbus. So you're like, okay, I get what you're trying to do, but
why?
It feels like, who are you?
It's the most fake tough guy garbage I've ever seen. You've seen the video of the two guys in the tap-out shirts at the party backing out the door when someone says they'd actually fight them. That's the Buffalo Sabres.
Yeah, I get it. You had to do something, and you're like, you can't let it set. You can't wait for the next time Tage Thompson takes a hit up high. You hope it doesn't come to that, so you have to do something the next time you're on the ice. But I mean, good on Columbus. They very obviously were prepared. Like, all right, if you want to fight Olivier, just go for it.
He's a tough guy too.
Yeah,
might be right up there in the heavyweight class.
Brad was like, if you're someone who doesn't stand a chance in a fight on the ice, like Ryan. Like when I was, I was very scrawny as a kid, and I would go in and get in a scrum, and if someone got me one-on-one, it didn't go great for me.
Going for the eyes.
Yeah, I remember a couple times.
I will bite, I will kick.
And that's often how it went. And there was one time I remember where there's a guy where I went in there, he kneed our goalie in the chest.
Hell yeah.
And this dude was big, and he was just bullying us all game. And I had a lot of momentum because I was skating back, and I was like, well, I'm going to drill him, and then he's going to kill me. And I drilled him, and he happened to slip and fall, and the refs got between us.
Oh, perfect.
And he got tossed from the game because he wanted to rip my head off, and he just had a bad reaction. Tossed from the game, and everyone in the room after came in laughing their asses off. They're like, 1, good on you for defending the goalie, and 2, you almost just died. That man, you're lucky we never have to play that team again. That man almost killed you. So I was the small guy who got his face caved when he needed to. Buffalo needs that, apparently. Not me. I'm not fighting.
What's Zach Benson doing? Why is he not out there?
Yeah. Let's blame the small guys.
I agree.
Okay, we have to move on to overtime. But speaking of physicality, we should. You know how there used to be the Don Cherry Rock'em Sock'em? We should do Evan Lobsinger. We love violence montages.
Here's Evan Lobsinger's 32-minute breakdown of Ryan Hartman's, I don't even know what to call it, face slam of Tim Stützle.
I forgot about that too, yeah.
He was like, I was just using like his head as leverage.
For the record, I wasn't about to celebrate what Ryan Hartman did. I was going to talk about the Cooley hit. Actually, the Ryan Hartman thing, though, he got a 10-game suspension, and I was like, yeah, you deserve that.
He's like, what, a 4-time repeat offender now?
Ryan Hartman does stuff off the draw. Like, there aren't 4K cameras pointed at every player on the ice.
Specifically at the face-off.
He's such an idiot.
He's
Puck's not even dropped yet. They won't suspect a thing.
He's lucky he only got 10 because that was the opposite of the McDavid stealth assassin elbow.
Tim Stützle has a reputation of diving. He didn't dive there. His face was pouring blood. If I'm Tim Stützle, I'm faking like being wobbly and skating off the ice, and that way he gets a 20-gamer. That was bullshit. That was honest. That there's no like we're like, yeah, be a tough guy, go out there, make a statement. Sometimes you cross the line to prove a point. Not like that. Ryan Hartman and what he's multiple occasions, like it's just stupid.
When are they doing the Kucherov suspension?
Yeah, I'm sure.
Trip on Rasmussen.
I'm sure after the next game where Detroit plays them on Saturday.
You have to bring up the Cooley hit. You have to just finish up this episode with that.
Will Cooley's hit on Alex Pietrangelo. Look,
I thought it was fake.
If he wasn't going to miss 4 Nations before, he sure as hell is now.
He's going to have a maintenance month.
And that was it was clean. It was the kind of hit where you're like, oh, I felt that. The sound made me feel it in my chest.
I can't believe he got up.
Yeah, it's a good thing Pietrangelo is a big boy. I don't think he would have otherwise.
He would have been in the 6th row if he was 4 inches shorter.
I don't think this was Campbell on Umberger from back in the day, but I don't think it's that far away from it. Like that was
He got hit in Madison Square Garden and landed in Long Island.
on Long Island, Brad. Come on.
Whatever.
Like that was. I immediately thought of you. I was like, Evan's gonna lose his mind when he sees this.
Like I said, I didn't think it was real.
We should do an Evan Lobsinger Rock'em Sock'em.
I'm allowed to put anything I want in there.
Yeah.
It can be hits and anything.
You know what? Yeah, absolutely.
We need Nedeljkovic to start fighting very fast.
Well, Kosta's going to be here soon.
Excellent.
Yeah,
excellent.
He'll want to fight. But Cooley fought after that hit. He had to fight right away. And I hate fights after clean hits, but that hit was so big where I'm like, there's no way in real time they knew that hit was clean.
No.
Because the impact, you're like, there's nothing other than a dirty hit that would lead to that impact. It was a clean hit. You're like, yeah, you're going to drop the gloves there.
It reminds me of, so Patrick Kane was talking about Dustin Byfuglien. And obviously he was the hardest hitter for a while. He made Chris Pronger look like his little brother in that one playoff series. But anyway, this is totally unrelated. This is dumb. I don't even know why I'm talking about this.
Well, you got to go now. We're in.
He was talking about how, they're at a preseason skate. Everybody was out there. Byfuglien showed up, was just, looking good, whatnot. But he was kind of injured, not really into it. He's getting some physio, and everyone at the end was like walking to their cars, like, all right, see you tomorrow. He's like, no, you won't. And he never saw him again. He's like, that's the last time I ever saw him.
Sometimes we call guys a freight train.
More people need to leave like that.
That's true.
It's like, no, you won't.
And like you call guys a freight train on the ice. Dustin Byfuglien, if he came to hit you, he wouldn't even be moving fast, but just the amount of momentum with his big body. I have not seen a guy in his generation dominate players like he did. I miss Big Buff.
I saw a hit he threw where he actually hit 3 people.
Oh yeah. A guy in each hand in a scrum happened more than once in his career.
He was a bouncer when he was out there, just kicking out drunk 19, 20, 21-year-olds from the bar.
You know what I said earlier where you're like, it doesn't matter who's on the ice, go get your face caved in? Not if it's Dustin Byfuglien.
No.
You're allowed to leave. If it's just everyone in the room be like, no, that we understand.
Yeah.
Okay, we're getting off the rails, so let's jump to our final segment here on the Winged Wheel podcast after this break.
We're going to overtime.
Overtime is brought to you by our Patreon supporters, patreon.com/Winged Wheel podcast. If you want to support the show, again, the bonus episodes with bloopers and outtakes, the giveaways, the 2 tickets to every Red Wings home game, the Discord, all of that, lots more. And let's take some questions here from our patrons. James McLean, aka Jambo, says, lots of talk about the rising cap being great. I agree, but do you not think that this kind of dilutes the strong position Yzerman had with cap flexibility? He still does, and more than most, but it allows UFAs to be more picky or ask for a bit more from Detroit since we have more. Yeah, if everyone has a bigger pool, then everyone has a bigger pool. So there's a window that passed here, and I think that was not so much now, but especially in the pandemic where Detroit had cap flexibility, that advantage is ceded to a big degree here.
It still comes down to an issue of competency because with more money, it's going to get spent. The good GMs will spend it on good players. The bad GMs will fill up their cap with mediocre players. And not that Yzerman hasn't been guilty of that. But, when you look at percentage of cap, it's a percentage. It's not every player in the league gets $1 million more per year. The top players get an extra $2-3 million, whereas your bottom 6, bottom pair guys should probably only go up by $500,000 a year. And a lot of GMs will miss that memo. And yeah, maybe in the first summer or two, it's a free for all where everybody's got cap space. A lot of teams will cap themselves out quickly.
Kaylee R., brand new patron, says, hey boys, new sponsor here. Welcome Kaylee to the Dub Club. And Kaylee says, wondering what your opinion is on moving to a more in-arena experience like some other broadcasts have, where instead of ads or the ad break card comes up, we just get shots of the arena inside. Obviously, this would probably be a more expensive feature, but if I never had to hear the Coca-Cola screeching goal celebration lady ad again, I would thank the gods. If the NHL first made their streams available online easily, that's step one. There are people who would pay more, like, they have like Disney Plus with ads and without ads, that kind of thing, Netflix. If you had NHL without ads, you would get a lot of people paying for that too.
We need to walk before we can run.
Yeah. not the cart before the horse here, but I like the idea. Sometimes like when you get a broadcast, ESPN, they used to have the live sports.
They had one graphic and they would replay that 10-second graphic for 2 minutes.
I almost went insane. And then they changed it partway through last season and into this season. It's just like background hockey noises. You're like, thank goodness. Chris Gatchell says, do you guys think the Four Nations break will affect how the team is performing? They had a really bad game after they had a practice off, but now the majority of the team has a 2-week break across the league. Personally, don't know or don't think so, but who knows? I'm along for the ride.
Every team in the league is in the same boat. They're all going to be coming back a little more relaxed, a little rusty, slightly hungover. It's going to be a universal experience, so I don't think it changes a lot.
There's a chance. That's part of what makes a good team is how you get back in focus when you just had a nice long vacation. Think of your first day back at work after being off for a while.
I don't even know where I am.
Yeah, but that's going to be a challenge. The better teams who had the same amount of time off are going to be able to do it better. So we'll see how McLellan has them focused. Wings fan in Chicago, another new patron. Welcome to the Dub Dub Club. Name level supporter. Thank you so much for your support. They said, new patron here, finally got my money up, not my funny up, and decided to spend it wisely. Well, wait till you hear our bonus overtime episodes, then let us know. My question is, what would the scenario be if we were to win a playoff round, and how would that play out?
The Leafs.
Because the Leafs beat themselves in the playoffs.
No, because some cosmic voodoo evil force wills the Leafs to lose every playoff series they're in, so we just need to be the fortunate souls at the other end of that.
You know what else would be super poetic? Getting Washington in the first round and beating them in the first round, because everything that happened last year, and they embarrassed themselves in the first round, and then they get embarrassed by the team that they edged out at Game 82 of the previous season.
Because of a BS empty net, which I still will not blame Tortorella for. It was understandable at the time, but yeah. The Caps didn't deserve that spot. That was ours.
Whoever was going to make it in was going to get thumped, but the Capitals especially, you looked at their goal differential, you're like, what are you doing? How does this happen? But yeah.
Look at the Red Wings March in December. That's how that happens.
I think it's either the Leafs, and this is improbable no matter what, but it's the Leafs, or let's say it's like 2-3 Detroit or the divisional seed somehow. Extremely unlikely. The Detroit and Ottawa, I could see that potentially. But Florida is going to be a tough challenge. Washington would be less of a tough challenge, but still. Grand Rapids Girly says, can you go into a bit of which of the other teams are the biggest threats to our current very amazing position?
Igor Shesterkin.
The New York Rangers. I'm never counting Boston out, and I'm not so much on the. I know the Islanders have gone 8-2. I don't know how sustainable that is. I'll go Boston and New York as well. Yeah, but
I know Tampa's already in a wild card position, but they're just too good to be hanging on the bubble, I think.
Realistically, Tampa is going to probably end up in that third Atlantic seed, and then Ottawa and Detroit are hoping to be the two wild cards. Like realistically speaking here, and then Ottawa and Detroit have to hold off the New Yorks and the Bostons of the world.
New patron here, Lennon Vandersand. Welcome to the Dub Dub Club. Thank you so much for being a name level supporter. Says, what's the biggest difference between this 7-game win streak and the last 7-game heater we went on? Trevor has asked this question during morning skates, but I'm curious what your guys' takes on this is. First time Patreon supporter. Can't wait to continue to support. Thank you so much, Lennon. There's a graphic posted on our accounts as well about this. And it is a tale of two tapes here. Like the first one, the offense on the power play especially was firing. And it wasn't so many goalie games. I think in the second 7-game streak, there was a little bit more goalieing. Strength of competition probably factors in as well, but the defense was tighter too, not as high scoring. The power play cooled off a little bit there. So I think you went from all cylinders firing to you were getting a little bit more depth scoring, but also locking games down when you needed to on the second 7-game streak, it felt. Goalies have had to come up more in the second stint for sure. Okay, we're actually going to wrap there. We have a lot of overtime questions to get to in our bonus episode as well. Thank you all so much for tuning into this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast. We're going to be back with you on Sunday, one game between now and then against the Tampa Bay Lightning at home. If you are a Patreon supporter, thank you so very much for your support. You make everything we do possible. And if you want to support us on Patreon, patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast. And if you want to go the extra mile, but Patreon's not for you, you can support us by subscribing and leaving a rating or review wherever you get your podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, thumbs up, the stars, all that helps a ton. Tell a friend about the show. It makes a big difference. Thank you to all of our sponsors of the Winged Wheel podcast and to our name level supporters on Patreon. Arjun Shanker, Yves Bartels on behalf of the Sarah Grand Foundation, Aikfer, THL Champ, Samuel Soderholm, Icon, Alexander Hansen, Ghost of OSBP, Glenn Brabham, Matthew M. Rice, C. Lyon, Adam Rose, Adam Zuiza, Admiral Matt S. of the Cheesebag Navy, Alex Toger, Asher Killian, Beer League Legend, Best James Bond, Bingo Bango, Brandon Mann, brand new name level supporter. Welcome, Brandon, to the Dub Dub Club. Brett Kokesh, Carl Brutinen Analuski, Carl Provi, CB55, Citizen High Five, Clip Clop Nene, Connor Scovey, Craig Gibble, Denny's Gamer Girl, Derek Enstam, DJ Denton, Eric Hill, Give Blood, Fight Probert, Goose Looney's Drinking Club, Grand Rapids Girly, Griffin, God Creatives, Hatrick Sandine Pelica, Hockeytown Matt, Hassam Al-Qassem, Jay Gollum, Jacob Turner, James McLean, aka Jambo, Jeff Pridemore, John Ingalls, Jonathan Miller, Kaylin Wood, Casper the Friendly Post, brand new name level supporter. Welcome to the Dub Dub Club. Thank you for your support. Lunchbox, Mark Hernandez, Marty, Matt Keeler, Matt McKay, Michael Edlund, Mr. Kuzi. Now I have to learn how to click on a Macintosh. RA, Raptor Kitchen, Riley Enright, Roy Donk, Ryan Britt, Scott Martin, Skeletor, Slim Smitty Cards, new name level supporter, I believe. Steve the Liability, Steven Ordelab, that's what I appreciate about you. Wallman's Elite Dancing D, Wings fan in Chicago, brand new name level supporter. Eyes are playing Stan, Aaron Hudson, General Andy Bohannon of the Cheesebag Army, Sam Bankson, AA Ron, AB, All Motor No Hands, Ann Stanislavski, Bellingham Acid Balls, Bex, CE Hayes, Chimkim Nutgits, Chris Felinsky, Commander Ben Barron of the Cheesebag Space Force, Connor Layton, Corey Prida, Darren Fick, Datsuk Dangleberries, Deep In, Cider, Doctor Following Up on Your Shin Extensions, Dylan Larkin Trait Sacrifice, DeLucas Larkmond, Eric Nance, Evan Beckner, Gene Sullivan, Grepsky, Griffey Boy. I have 3 Pettersons and no money. Why can't I have no Pettersons and 3 money? James Pridemore, Jeremiah Dobo, Jim, JM Rhapsody, Joey Jojo Shabadoo, Josh Yelton, Chaotic Monkey, Kevin McCracken, Quaz, Larkin's Loyal Lemming, Lennon, Vandersand, new name level supporter, Linda Hull, Lonnie Zone, Lucas Raitman, Mitch Minier, Ophelia, As Good As It Gets, Ryan M, Sandy P, Right Hand D, Steven, that other guy, the Hodag, the Hat 123, Trent Thorough, What's the D for? Wings fan of St. Louis, Scott, and your second favorite patron. Thank you all so very much. Talk to you Sunday.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to visit wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you'll find links to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find ways to support the show, like Patreon, official podcast merchandise, and more. And don't forget to follow us on X at Winged Wheel Pod, at Ryan Hanna, WWP, at Brad Crisco, and at Hockeytown Evan, as well as Winged Wheel Podcast on Instagram.